I thank all of the sheriffs for coming and for the feedback that they've given and the input they've given, and again for the work that they and their men and women in uniform do to keep our community safe. With that, we'd be happy to take some questions.
I'll start. I know that there, especially in Orleans Parish, there has been some issues with recruitment. It sounds like just about everywhere there's been issues with recruitment and retention. Were there any hardcore solutions that were found today that you could say that right away, I mean, these are right away needs that right away would get people to come and to stay?
You know, when you talk to the sheriffs that are always having a challenge with recruitment, you know, right now you're seeing more of a dip in interest in people across the country. It's not just a Louisiana problem. You're seeing it in many other states too. And so I think, one, it is the morale issue. We've got to make sure that we're expressing our strong support for the men and women in uniform who keep our community safe. Look, if there's a dirty cop, every cop wants to get rid of dirty cops. But it's a question of recognizing that all of the others who are risking their lives, and it is a dangerous job. Some days much more dangerous even than others, but you don't know what's behind the door. When you're answering a call, when someone's making that call for 911, they want to make sure quickly some officer can get there to help keep their family safe. And so that's why it's important that we all have the backs of the law enforcement officers in our communities who are keeping us safe. And I think sometimes that gets lost, and just increasing morale, increasing the support for law enforcement. We talked about some other specific ideas. Could there be incentives to help recruit more law enforcement officers? You know, clearly those are things we would look at, but in general, I think it's just sending the message that we support the brave men and women who are out there risking their lives in our communities every day, and they're not hearing that enough right now.
Was there a specific area that you guys came together and identified today, maybe as a priority, that you might want to take back to Washington and get some help on the federal level with?
You know, if you look, and there's some good proposals that I've seen in Congress. One of them is to give more support in terms of federal dollars for things like body cameras. And you've seen, and I think there's been a pendulum swing within law enforcement across the country. In the early days, there was some skepticism about what that would do, but now I think most sheriffs, most police chiefs that you hear from across the country recognize the value of something like body cameras, because it gives them a response if somebody's accusing an officer of doing something they didn't do. In many cases, you see that video get out quickly, and it shows that the officer was doing their job properly. And so that does have a cost to it. And there are proposals in Washington that would put more money out there for things like that, because as I know Sheriff LaPinto and I have had this conversation a lot, when you have a larger department, there's a big cost to storing that data. And so we've talked about things that could be done at the federal level to help law enforcement to bulk up on the newer technology. All of the sheriffs talked to me about how they're using technology to solve crimes quicker, and it's amazing how technology has advanced to allow them to rapidly identify criminals in ways where it might have taken weeks or months, or just the case would have gone unsolved. And that technology is expensive too, and so you know, helping our local law enforcement on the ground is important. You know, with some of the early COVID money, it was very narrow in what it could be used for, but maybe if we can make that money more flexible, that's already out there, that's something that we're looking at as well.
I've got another one for you. We're in the middle of this federal investigation now into the state police, and Congressman, you can answer this, or any of the sheriffs can answer this question as well. You know, you've got a whole troop that's now under investigation. There's a lot of distrust of police in that area because of that. How do you restore the faith in officers when you've got something like this that has dominated the headlines for the last few months? You know, restoring faith comes with accountability. And you've got to have transparency and accountability. I remember having this conversation many times with Mark Morial. When Mark was mayor of New Orleans, and I know Marlon and I got to know each other when I was first in the state legislature, and I represent some of the city of New Orleans, when New Orleans was seeing a big surge in crime back then, and a lot of us remember the Louisiana Pizza Kitchen murders, and that was one of those turning points where the city of New Orleans really rose up. But there were problems internally with the NOPD that were going unrecognized,
And to his credit, and Mayor Maury and I had some disagreements on policy, but we were very much in agreement on that. And I've commended him publicly many times for the position he took. He worked really hard. He went and found Richard Pennington to come in and clean up the problems that were existing within the department. And people were held accountable. People went to jail. And ultimately, you saw communities reestablish trust with police that was lost because there were problems that were not being addressed. I've seen this in other departments too. I've talked to some of my colleagues in Minnesota. The Minneapolis department had big problems before George Floyd, and they were not getting corrected. And so communities know innately if there's a culture of corruption in the department that's not being addressed. And so the best thing to do is to address it head on. And again, just like Mayor Morial did at the time, that did turn the department around. And so you can't hide from this. You gotta confront it and address it and get the community involved as you make those changes. And so, I think that the job that these sheriffs have done has been incredible at working with the community, because there's got to be a direct relationship between the police officers and the communities that they keep safe. And if that breaks down, then you see problems. So the best thing they can do is confront it head on and correct the problems.
Got one last question. We've been talking about funding, and you had mentioned before maybe some incentive programs to help with the retention rates, and we were talking about obviously how morale
And recruitment,
is,
yeah.
Yes, how morale is a big part of that, but also what about pay rates as well? Could you talk a little bit more about recruitment and incentives?
And ultimately, the day-to-day pay for police officers is a local issue. Each community, each of these sheriffs has a different pay scale. They have a different benefits package, because it's not just the paycheck, it's the benefits that go along with it that help different police forces recruit people. And so, that's not something that the federal government needs to be directly involved in, but if there's things like helping to pay for education, we've done that with other entities before. And again, where we can get creative, let's try to brainstorm, but I do think it starts with letting the good police officers across the country know that we have their backs, because when they're doing their job right, even when they do everything right, something bad can happen, because when they respond to a call, it's because something bad already did happen that they then have to go and respond to. And if they do their job right, they need to know we have their back. And in many communities, they don't feel like people have their back, and I do think that's got to be something that we as a community take on. Well, thank you all. Appreciate you coming again. I appreciate what these sheriffs do, and especially what the brave men and women who put on that uniform and keep our community safe do every single day. Thank you very much.